in an hour's time. And yes, we are back. We are back with yet another live broadcast. The first one. In the first one, we are discussing all matters PSG following following them losing their unbeaten one in the French League One. There, losing to Nice by 3 goals to 1. So their unbeaten record ended at 30 matches because they lost on match day 31. The longest record was of Nantes, or yes, Nantes. That was in 1994-95 season when they went 32 games unbeaten. People thought they would go the season unbeaten, but that was never clinched. So, anyways, allow me to get ourselves set up here as do the routine microphone check testing that we usually do, and then we will get everything started for today's broadcast. And I think we're good to go. We are good to go in all respects. In regards to our audio, we look set. So, anyways, welcome back to the channel. Thank you to all our new subscribers. Thank you to our new followers. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for liking the broadcasts. Those that do join us always live on these broadcasts. Those that watch our videos much later after the broadcasts are done. You really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. We do not take your time for granted. We really thank you for your support. So, like I had said earlier, this next broadcast, we will be having our focus on the Premier League that's to come. Of course, there's plenty of action to come our way in the Premier League, away from the Premier League. In Spain is the El Classico of the Copa del Rey final between Barcelona and Real Madrid. Of course, yesterday we were getting some news that we did get news that Real Madrid cancelled the pre-match press conference leading to that game because of comments that had been made by the chosen match day officials. Real Madrid did release a video in sort of to try and signal to their fans and the rest of the world that the officials who made the comments that they found unworthy have been culpable in punishing Real Madrid in different matches in one way or the other. More like a gaslighting kind of thing, and it's the kind of thing that Real Madrid have done literally the entire season. You had voices from out of that club always complaining about referees, Spanish referees, their biases, and that kind of thing against Real Madrid. Whether that's really true for in respect to the rest of the world or the eyes of the entire world remains to be seen, but at least that's what Real Madrid feel. They feel that they do not get all their decisions right. But today it's the Copa del Rey final between Real Madrid and Barcelona. So, arguably, this is going to be the third El Clasico of the season. Remember, there's another that will be coming in the Spanish La Liga for the return leg. The first leg ended in a fight, I think, ended with Barcelona thumping Real Madrid. The first encounter was in the Supercopa España, where Barcelona beat up against Real Madrid by 5 goals to 2. Robert Lewandowski, Rafinha among the goal scorers. Vokšek Szczesny getting the red card in that one. In that game, that did end 5-2 in favor of Barcelona. I think it was played away from Spain. Yes. So Szczesny got a red card in that particular fixture. Then you had goal scorers like Rafinha, like Alejandro. Then you had Mbappe, one of the goal scorers for Real Madrid on the other side, and that kind of thing. So it's kind of going to be interesting to see to see how Real Madrid do bounce back from that kind of humiliation that they did have to sort of to withstand. And I'm sure for all intents and purposes they wouldn't want to stomach another one. Yes, Rodrigo and Mbappe squad for Real Madrid, what turned out to be mere consolations. Lamine Yamal, Lewandowski, Rafinha, Alejandro Balde were the goal scorers for Barcelona in that particular fixture. I think we need to look back towards what? Was it 2016 or 2014? No, actually, it may have been longer than that when Barcelona meet Real Madrid in the finals of the Copa del Rey and Real Madrid win that game. For those of you that remember Gareth Bale with his pace, going on to beat that Real Madrid, Barcelona backline. But anyways, that's just the tip of the iceberg of all the action that will be coming our way this weekend, because there's plenty of action. There's the FA Cup semi-finals. That's in England. Both games will be played at Wembley Stadium. The first coming on Saturday, which is today, and then the other are coming on Sunday. So guys, if you're new here, kindly like the broadcast, kindly leave me a comment. Yes, I can see Irani asking, why are you there? Now, that's a famous quote from a Ugandan man called Simon Kagwanjala, a journalist. Yes, he's a journalist with one of the local radio stations called Akabozi FM or Radio 2. Then he works with another media entity called NBS, that's a television. So I can see Irani asking that odd question, why are you gay? I do understand the kind of humor that you're trying to communicate with that comment. But thank you for tuning to the broadcast. And if you're new, kindly remember to subscribe and like this broadcast as well. But anyway, jokes aside, like I was saying, plenty of action to come our way in the Premier League. We do have an early kickoff when Chelsea entertain Everton. Remember last weekend, Chelsea had to leave it late against Fulham to win that game. So we'll be discussing that and more. Then Manchester United will be in action on Super Sunday. Liverpool need just 1 point to clinch the Premier League title. In what has been quite an incredible season for them so far. I think they've only lost 2 games this campaign, losing to Nottingham Forest and then to Fulham in a 3-2 defeat. Nottingham Forest, they did lose by goal to nil at Anfield. That goal scored by Callum Hudson-Odoi. So, like I said, FA Cup, Premier League, the Copa del Rey final, and all that kind of thing. So, in La Liga, when Barcelona and Real Madrid met, again, it was because Barcelona scored 9 goals against Real Madrid this season. And again, it's painstaking for Real Madrid fans. It's really painstaking that they get to take such horrible beatings versus Real Madrid. So where do we get it all started from? Let's start in the Premier League. I can see Natalia Zinko. Thank you for joining the broadcast. Much appreciated. Thank you for the comments. Kindly leave me a like. And if you're new here, kindly subscribe to the channel so that I can make it 1,000 subscribers. We are currently at 988, I think. I stand to be corrected if anybody has subscribed during the course of this broadcast. But I'll be it will be much appreciated. So, but like I was saying, it's one of those that we'll start in the Premier League. Okay, the early kickoff. Here's the run of fixtures that will be coming our way, at least for as far as Saturday is concerned. Like I said, in the early kickoff, Chelsea entertained Everton. That's at Stamford Bridge. That game does kick off at 2:30 p.m. East African time, and then Brighton will be at home against West Ham United at 5 p.m. just as much as Newcastle up against Ipswich Town at the same time, and then Southampton will welcome Fulham, while the other game will be between Wolverhampton Wanderers against Leicester City. Now, Ipswich Town, Southampton, and Leicester City have already been confirmed as relegated sides. We will have no late kickoff as far as the Premier League is concerned, because what would have been a Premier League late kickoff will be the FA Cup semi-final at 7:15 there, when Crystal Palace face off with Aston Villa. So, and then on Super Sunday, we do have 2 fixtures in the Premier League when Liverpool hosts Tottenham Hotspurs. So they will be looking to clinch that Premier League title at Anfield, at home soil. And then FC Bournemouth at the Vitality Stadium will welcome Manchester United. While then the second semi-final of the FA Cup will come between Manchester City and Nottingham Forest, and that is at 6:30 p.m. That's East African time. But like I said, we'll kick things off at Stamford Bridge, where Chelsea do play Everton. Now, we're talking about a Chelsea side that does have ambitions of finishing at least in the top 5 and fight to qualify for the UEFA Champions League. Currently, they are in the semi-finals of the UEFA Conference League, and they will be up against Dragison. I think Jagison. Forgive the mispronunciation of that team's name, but that is the opponent they will be having to face if they are to go ahead to the finals of the UEFA Conference League, and a competition they do hope to win. But for now, all their attention, all their focus is going to be in the Premier League. And I was reading somewhere on X just a couple of minutes back before starting this broadcast. Kindly forgive that. And Enzo Maresca was saying he does understand the frustration of Manchester United, of Chelsea fans. And here is a quote. Enzo Maresca says, sometimes we have on the bench 3 or 4 players born in 2006, 7, 8. Do you see that? No, I see that. It's clear. It is an improvement. If you want to see that, you see that. If you don't want to see that, you don't see that. But that's just a part of his comments. But he did say he does understand the frustration of Chelsea fans, who in recent times have not really been happy with him in terms of the way he's sort of assembled his team against, especially what they deem to be lesser opponents, and how they've competed in some of those games. Because let's be honest, they've not been at their best, especially in the second part or second phase of the season. Cole Palmer, we all know he struggled for form for as long as we can remember, and that kind of thing. So Cole Palmer needs to wake up and see to it, and try to help Chelsea qualify for the UEFA Champions League next season. In the last outing, they did beat up against Fulham by 2-1. Of course, having had to leave it late, Pedro Neto scoring that winning goal in at the time to ensure that Chelsea do walk away with with all 3 points from that particular fixture. And it does go without saying that, do they deserve, personally, given what they've been able to show us this season? Of course, they did appoint Enzo Maresca at the start of the season. Many of us were doubtful or skeptical of his prowess in managing a team the stature of Chelsea, having come from a team like Leicester City, who he had guided to promotion back into the Premiership. I personally thought that it was going to be a bit of deep waters for him to try and swim through, given the amount of pressure, given the amount of investment that Chelsea had put in signing players like Mukalo Modric, players like Moises Caicedo, players like Enzo Fernandez, or players that cost above 100 million euros. And then, of course, notwithstanding, you had players like Cole Palmer, with whom they had invested 45 million pounds, signing Nicolas Jackson from Villarreal, Philippe Jackinson, the goalkeeper that they did bring in. You did have all that kind of investment, signing Romeo Lavia for 50 million pounds from Southampton, Pedro Neto for 60 million euros from Wolverhampton Wanderers. I mean, the Nuno Maduekes of this world, signing Yao Felix, name it all the players that they had signed, Malo Gusto, name it all. So you felt that it was going to come with a bit of pressure. In the first phase, he dealt really well with that pressure. Of course, he did trim his squad, letting go players like Raheem Sterling. Never mind that it was to his anguish. He did join Arsenal on a season-long run. Never mind that has gone horribly wrong in every aspect, in terms of a footballing perspective, in terms of money spent on the side of Arsenal. I do not think Raheem Sterling has delivered at any level whatsoever. But that notwithstanding, they did have a good start to the season. Let's not forget that I think about 10, 12 games into the season, we had started speaking about Chelsea as potential title contenders. Of course, Enzo Maresca was quick to dismiss us to say that they were not at the level that we thought they were, that there was a lot needed to be done to improve the team, that they needed to do a lot of things to correct, and that has come true. Of course, along the way, they did suffer significant injuries to their backline. Players like Wesley Fofana, suffering injuries. Their captain, Richie James, and then to the extent that they had to recall players like Trevor Chaloba from Crystal Palace, where he had been on loan. They let out go Ben Chilwell on loan to Crystal Palace. Axel Disasi headed to Aston Villa on loan. But then they remained with the likes of Levi Colwill and that kind of thing. So Nicholas Jackson suffered an injury that kept him out of action for almost 2 months or so. And Pedro Neto, we all know his injury problems. Then Cole Palmer sort of falls off the wagon and goes off form. Nonima Dweke sort of blew hot and cold. And so a lot of moving components at midfield about that midfield. Then Romeo Lavia suffered a long-term injury, and yet that midfield of him, alongside Moises Caicedo, with Enzo Fernandez coming in ahead of them, had started to feel like, a very good thing that would really push Chelsea forward. So things sort of fell off the wagon midway the season, and they've never looked the same team ever since then. Yes, they've won games here and there, but they've not really looked like that Chelsea team that had started the season, and that sort of got us to question Enzo Maresca's credentials. Of course, in some of his infamous rotations, among them was pitting, bringing Wesley James to play as a midfielder. Yes, we know managers like Pep Guardiola have done this before. When he was at Bayern Munich, he got Phil Plum from playing right back and played him in the midfield, and that worked out perfectly well. So one would have thought that Chelsea, that Enzo Maresca could pull that off, but again, it wasn't really clicking. When you look at their recent form in terms of the last 5 Premier League fixtures, they've only won 2 games, drawn 2 and lost 1, losing to Arsenal by a goal to nil. Then the draws coming up against lesser opponents. Like I said, I think that's pretty much the disappointment of Chelsea fans. That 2-2 draw against Ipswich Town did not really sit well, because they had come from goals down to ensure that they pick a point in that one. I think Jordan Sancho scoring the equalizer in that one to secure a point for Chelsea. Then, of course, they beat up against Fulham, like I said, and then that goalless draw with Brentford. They thought their team was sort of blunt in terms of creating scoring opportunities. Then they did beat up against Tottenham Hotspur by goal to nil, still won, but unconvincingly, and that kind of thing. So, really, you do get the sense that there's been a bit of animosity from the Chelsea fans about this side. Now, do they deserve to qualify for the UEFA Champions League? If they do finish in the top 5, by all measures and counts, it would have meant that they've qualified. But would they deserve? And given their current squad, even though they are looking to revamp it in the summer, I do think that they should play in the Europa League next season. They've done really well in the UEFA Conference League this season, but given that Enzo Maresca has been given this project, because remember, he was handed a 5-year contract, and this is only his first year, I think they would do better if next season they do not have the pressure of the UEFA Champions League. They play in the Europa League. Of course, it also comes with its pressures, but in terms of squad depth, Chelsea have had really a big squad, so they've been able to rotate players across different competitions. Never mind that at some point it felt like that squad had narrowed down because of injuries, among other factors, and letting go of some players out on loan, including João Felix, who went to AC Milan, where it has not really worked out for him. So I do think that for them going to the Europa League would be the most deserving sort of competition. And because the UEFA Champions League comes with its pressure, you wouldn't want to go to the UEFA Champions League and you crash out in a humiliating fashion when you Chelsea. I'd rather they qualify for the Europa League, perhaps go do well in that Europa League and maybe reach the round of 16, either quarterfinals or semis, or even go ahead to win it like they did in 2013. We all remember 2013 when they were under the charges of Rafa Benitez Maudes, who had come on as an interim coach. I think he was he replacing in 2013. In 2013, I think it was after the sacking of Roberto Di Matteo, because in 2012 they had won the UEFA Champions League, beating Bayern Munich on the finals on penalties, and then they failed to finish in the top two of their group in the subsequent season, and they end up in Europa, where Benitez guided them to the title. And then they also, of course, won it in 2018, 2018-2019 season, when they were beating up against Arsenal by 4-1 in Baku, Azerbaijan. So it's a competition they've played well in. They've won it twice, of course. So I do think that if he does qualify for that competition and he gets to continue to build his team, they compete in the Premier League, and maybe then that next season they finish within the top 4 or top 5, qualify for the UEFA Champions League, but also his squad getting used to, all these games a little more. Yes, they've played them almost the entire season this season. So that's the kind of sense I get, and where I do think Chelsea is out. In comparison, on the side of Everton, Everton have not really had it any better in recent times in terms of winning Premier League games. When you look at their form in their last 5 games, they have 2 losses, one being against Man City last weekend, in which they lost by 2-0. Mateo Kovacic and Nick O'Reilly on the squad sheet there for Man City, even though those goals came after more than 80 minutes of play. But then a weekend prior, they had beaten up against Nottingham Forest. Still, it wasn't a very beautiful game. They needed a very late goal from Abdoulaye Diakore to win maximum points. Then had forced Arsenal in a 1-1 draw, and then lost to Liverpool by 0-0, and then also were engaged in a 1-1 draw with West Ham. So when you look at that, really, in comparison to Chelsea, of course, Chelsea look better on paper in terms of form, but they're going to be facing a team in Everton that does play with the low block. They're quite defensive. They can frustrate you. They can deny goal scoring opportunities, and they feel that you get in between. Jordan Pickford may rise to the occasion and save the day. In terms of the last 5 meetings between Chelsea and Everton, Chelsea have dominated the fixture. They've won 3 of those fixtures. They've drawn 2, including the goalless draw at Goodison Park earlier on this season. Last season, it included a 6-0 thumping for Everton. Remember, Chelsea were under the charges of Mauricio Pochettino, while Sean Dyche was still in charge at Everton. Then, actually, last season they shared it. Everton beat Chelsea at Goodison Park by 2-0, and then Chelsea won the reverse fixture by 6-0. And then, of course, there is also a 2-2 draw in between there, and then another Chelsea victory. So 2 victories for Chelsea, 1 for Everton, and 2 draws. And that's why it being a very an early kickoff, which I tend to think that early kickoff games really trouble the big teams. For those of you that do remember offhead, Nottingham Forest in an early kickoff versus Man City, they beat Man City by 0-0. When you go back to when you look at Arsenal, when it's played early kickoffs, they've struggled. Generally, big teams tend to struggle with these early kickoff games. I do not know why. What's the logic really behind that? And oftentimes, in some cases, it's been linked to having played a midweek game or something, but this is not going to be the case. But nonetheless, I still expect this game to end in a draw. Yes, Chelsea have all these big ambitions. They will be desperate to win the fixture. They will want to win the fixture. Will they eventually win it? I'm not really convinced. That's why I'm going for a 1-1 draw for my prediction. I'm sure your prediction could be different. If you're a Chelsea fan, it could be different, even if you're not a Chelsea fan. But that's my expectation as far as this particular fixture is concerned. Now, for all the other fixtures, I won't go into depth in them. That's for the Saturday fixtures between Brighton and West Ham, between Newcastle and Ipswich. But For Newcastle and Ipswich, that's a must-win game for Newcastle. Why? Because of what it means on the league table. Remember, Newcastle are fifth on the Premier League table with just a point behind Nottingham Forest. Now, if they win today's fixture against Ipswich Town, which I expect them to win with a big goal margin, probably beating them by 4-0 or even 4-1, about. That's my prediction for Newcastle. It helps them move third on the Premier League table with 62 points. With 62 points. Yes. As they wait for, because Man City have already played 34 games. Remember, they did play midweek. They beat up against Aston Villa by 2-1. That late goal in the 94th minute by Matthias Nunes won the game for them. And then, of course, so clearly Newcastle want to get back in that third place position where they had been dethroned. And then Nottingham Forest will then look to correct themselves. But Chelsea, the point will only leave them sixth on the Premier League table with 58 points, because Newcastle, like I said, are at 59 points. Anyways, it's just a prediction. So allow us move to Super Sunday, because that conversation for Super Sunday is really, really one that I really want us to have. And that fixture between Liverpool, let's start with Liverpool. Liverpool versus Tottenham Hotspurs. Like I said in the preamble of this particular broadcast, Liverpool have it all to do. They need just a single point to win the Premier League title. But then, remember, they're going to be at home. The last time they won the league title, that was in 2019-2020. That's the season in which we had COVID. So they never got the chance to celebrate with their fans because of the COVID-19 lockdowns, as we remember them. Even when stadiums reopened, there were a few people allowed in stadiums and they were seated, they were sparsely spread. So just imagine, I imagine the environment that is going to be at Anfield is going to be similar to that of a UEFA Champions League night. That's how electric I expect it to be. All the animosity Liverpool fans have been giving to Trent Alexander-Arnold, for what sometimes to be a lack of loyalty towards Liverpool, because it's speculated that he will be going to Real Madrid, will be put aside. They will look to Mo Salah to punish Tottenham Hotspurs and all their players. They will look to Dominic Szoboszlai, Alexis McAllister, Gravenberch, who has not been in the perfect form recently, to rise to the occasion and win all 3 points. No one watching your live stream, at least you're here commenting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining the broadcast. But yes, I do enjoy it with those that join. Even if it was one person, I'd still give them the same delivery, because half a loaf is better than nothing. Anyways, like I said, Liverpool will look to create that environment, and the fans will be backing their team to clinch the title today. And if recent results are anything to go by, Liverpool have beaten Tottenham in the last 2 fixtures in the Premier League, beating them by 4-2 and 6-3. That was this season. It's always been that high scoring fixture, Liverpool and Tottenham Hotspurs, and it's one in which every once in a while Tottenham Hotspurs come and give a bit of headache to Liverpool. So is today they go ahead and do it. As watching a little bit of Ange Postecoglou speaking in a pre-match press conference in the build-up to this particular fixture, and he said last season when they finished 5th, everybody thought it was good, but maybe not good enough. And then suddenly, because he said there was a game he was trying to win, and everybody was telling him not to win it, because that's the game in which they were facing. I do not remember the game, but that game meant that Arsenal could potentially, I think they were facing Man City, and had they beaten Man City, then Arsenal could have gone on perhaps to win the Premier League. And he said he could not believe that his own club fans were advocating that they lose a game just because it meant that their rival who doesn't go on to win the Premier League title. Could not make sense of that. And he says, even today, even though they are not nowhere near in contention for the Premier League, nowhere near contention for the Europa League place, nowhere near in contention for qualifying for Europe in terms of the UEFA Champions League and that kind of thing, he still thinks that at least there is some bit of history to be made, and the fixture is worth to give it their everything. Yes, they will give it everything, but Liverpool will just give it more. It's going to be an emotional fixture for Liverpool. They will need all their energy, which I think they will deploy, because I mean they're out of any other competition whatsoever. It's a Premier League game for them to play, and that's why I think Liverpool are going to smash Tottenham by 3-1. That's my prediction for Liverpool, and they will be crowned champions in front of their fans. And then at the end of the season, they should go ahead and have their trophy parade as they clinch their 20th Premier League title and equal Manchester United. So that midfield, like I said, McAllister, Szoboszlai, Gravenberch, a backline of Trent Alexander-Arnold, because last weekend, by the way, he came off the bench to win it for Liverpool as they beat up against Leicester by 1-0. Get the feeling they made that fixture difficult for themselves. It included Mo Salah hitting the upright in the first half and a couple of other missed opportunities that are in. So you do expect Virgil van Dijk alongside Ibrahim Konate, Robertson, or what's his name? Conor Bradley. Should Alexander-Arnold not start? Alex Becker in goal, and then Mo Salah, Luis Diaz, and Darwin Núñez usually comes off the bench, but it could be Mo Salah, yes, Luis Diaz alongside Diego Jota. That starts. Anyways, that's the expectation. On the side of Tottenham Hotspurs, you expect Guillermo Vicario, you expect Pedro Porro at left back. You do expect Destiny Udogie or Dejad Space at right back. You do expect Mickey van de Ven and Christian Romero. That back line, you do expect Yves Bissouma at the base of the midfield, if he's available to start. Pape Matza and James Maddison. At least that would be my ideal. Then Dejan Kulusevski, Son, and then Dominic Solanke to lead the lines. In the absence of either of those, then you get to fit in Brennan Johnson as one of the starters and any other that could be available. But like I said, Liverpool have dominated this fixture, beating up against Tottenham at least 4 out of the last 5 meetings. And it's a high scoring fixture. Like I said, the first leg ended in a 6-3 victory for Liverpool. That was at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, while last season, the Liverpool beat Tottenham at Anfield, excuse me, by 4-2, and then Tottenham beat up against Liverpool away. That's at Spurs Stadium by 2-1, and then the season before last, Liverpool beat Tottenham home and away by 4-3 and by 2-1. So it's a fixture that Liverpool really know how to win. And my expectation remains no different. Liverpool have only recorded 1 loss in the last 5 fixtures. That was the loss of 3-2 against Fulham. Otherwise, they've beaten up against Southampton 3-1, beaten up against Everton 1-0, Leicester 1-0, and West Ham 2-1. Spurs on the other side, only a single win in the last 5, in which they beat Southampton by 3-1. All the others have been losses, not even draws. That's why I expect them to lose. Even today, they lost to Nottingham Forest last weekend by 2-1. Elliot Anderson and Chris Wood scoring there for Nottingham Forest, and Richarlison scoring for Tottenham Hotspurs for what turned out to be near consolation. The weekend before that, they lost to Wolverhampton Wanderers by 4-2 that was at Molineux, and then lost to Chelsea by 1-0 and then also lost to Fulham by 2 goals to 0. So that's the expectation. Anyways, let's continue it with Manchester United, because Manchester United are up against a very stubborn side in AFC Bournemouth. Now, FC Bournemouth has been a giant killer this season. They've beaten up against Arsenal by 2 goals to 0. They beat up against Man City by 2 goals to 1. So they've really given Team Sedek. They beat up against Manchester United at Old Trafford by 3 goals to 0 in the first leg. Now, and it wasn't the first time, because even last season they still did it. Went to Old Trafford, beat Man United by 3 goals to 0. At the Vitality Stadium, it ended in a 2-all draw. That was last season. Now, this season, when they meet at the Vitality Stadium, that's the result we were to see. But last season, but one, United had beaten up against Bournemouth, home and away, beating them 3-0 at Old Trafford and 1-0 at the Vitality Stadium. Now, in the context of this game, Real Manchester United, as we all know, have one chance to win a piece of silverware this season, and that's through the UEFA Europa League, in which they play Athletic Bilbao in the semi-finals of that competition. Manchester United will be facing a familiar opponent in Athletic Bilbao. So I do get the feeling that it will be shown in the team selection, and the manager has spoken about this before, saying that they are prioritizing the UEFA Europa League. We all know how they advanced to the semi-finals, knocking out Lyon 7-6 on aggregate. After a 2-2 draw in France, they beat them 5-4 in that dramatic fixture at Old Trafford. So that we all remember. In Athletic Bilbao, they will be facing the familiar opponent, and we'll get to speak to that in the middle of the week. But just as a footnote, Athletic Bilbao, the last time they met United, they beat them home and away. But for now, it's Bournemouth that stares down our faces. Andoni Iraola, I mean, he's not afraid to beat up against the big boys, although their recent form has not been really promising. Not that of Manchester United is any better, but as far as the last 5 fixtures are concerned, they do have 1 win, 2 draws, and 2 losses, while Manchester United only have 1 draw and 1 victory. The victory coming up against Leicester City they beat them by 3 goals to 0. I think Bruno Fernandes, Alejandro Garnacho were among those, and was it Diego Dalot among those on the score sheet? Anyways, I think either Dalot or Joshua Zaks, but anyway, 3-0. And then they lost by 1-0 to Nottingham Forest. They drew against Man City in a goalless draw. They lost to Newcastle by 4 goals to 1, humiliating style. Then last weekend, they lost to Wolverhampton Wanderers by 1-0. On the other side, Bournemouth couldn't beat up against a 10-man Crystal Palace, because last weekend Crystal Palace were reduced to 10 men when Chris Richardson was given a red card, but he finished goalless in that fixture. Previously, they had beaten up against Fulham by 1-0, and then shared the spoils with West Ham in a 2-all draw, but lost to Ipswich by 2-1 and Brentford by a similar scoreline. So it's Bournemouth have not been in good shape. But if there's any fixture that they should be looking forward to returning back to winning ways, it should be versus Manchester United. Like I said, psychologically, Manchester United, the kind of headspace they are in is every thought is on winning that UEFA Europa League, because once you win the UEFA Europa League, then you automatically qualify for next season's UEFA Champions League. And that financially would mean a lot for Manchester United and for all the turmoil that they've had throughout the course of this campaign, which is arguably one of their worst seasons ever in Premier League history, because they have recorded 15 losses already. I mean, it will mean a lot for them if they walk out of this season in which they've been at arguably their worst with a piece of silverware. So expect so many changes in that starting 11. It could be Altair Buendia in goal. It could be Luke Shaw at left back. It could be a defense of Aiden Heaven, the one signed from Arsenal, alongside Lenioro. Does he start? Maybe at right back, it could be Dalot or a Patrick Togu that starts. Then you could have a midfield that has Christian Eriksen, that has Casemiro starting ahead of Manel Ugarte. That's part of my expectation. And then maybe Joshua Zaxi, if he's available to start, or Rasmus Hoyland. I mean, I do expect some kinds of changes, significant changes for that particular fixture. While the other side, Manchester United will have to be worried over a player that they have been linked with a move for, and that is Antoine Semenyo, very, very good attacking midfielder there for FC Bournemouth. Evan Nelson, that's the striker. Then there's that young defender of Dean, it's called Dean Housen. Yes, Dean Housen, the Spanish international, although born in Netherlands, that has been linked with the move to Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, all Tottenham Hotspurs, all linked with the move for the player who has a £50 million release clause in his contract. Only 20 years of age, very, very decent, centre back. Yeah. Then there's a Kakez, a left back. I forget his other name, Kakez, that has also been linked with the move to Liverpool. Yes, to Liverpool. Left back, right back. One of the two is true. But anyways, that Bournemouth team is really, really capable of, of beating up against Man United side on any given day. And it wouldn't really, really surprise me if they did what they were able to do in the first leg. Players like Patrick Kluivert did score in the first leg, Anton Semenyo squad, and Dean Housen squad in that fixture versus Man United. So really, you do expect that that Andoni Iraola can conjure something out to win this game. Kepa Arrizabalaga will need to rise to the occasion, because it's not to say that United will be so poor that Everton, that Bournemouth will have a walkover. So really, yes, Milos Kakez is the player that whose name as trying to reflect on. Yes, it's Milos Kakez, the other player. And then Ryan Christie in that midfield, Tyler Adams, all these are very, very decent players that can punish Manchester United on any given day. We are 43 minutes into the broadcast. Once again, Ivani, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your comments. Thank you, Zinko, Natalia Zinko. Thank you, Naji Siro. Thank you so much for all of you guys, and all those that have been in the Kamori, as we call it, or behind the scenes, without those, but you've not commented during the course of this broadcast. But anyways, before I wrap it up, like I said, the FA Cup is on. Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa, very, very big fixture. Crystal Palace were in the finals of the FA Cup back in 2016. Jason Panchon scored for them in that game, but eventually they lost to Manchester United, that was under the charges of Louis van Gaal, by 2-1. Jesse Lingard scoring the winner. Then Juan Mata, with his deflected ball, scored the equalizer in that game. Chris Smalling got a red card in that game. In that final, that's 2016. We're talking about a Crystal Palace side that were under the charges of manager Alan Pardew. It had players like Jason Panchon. It had Yannick Bolasie. It had players like Wilfred Zaha. It had Dwight Gale. Dwight Gale. Nathan Elclaini, I think, had joined them. Had he? Maybe. But anyway, that's United still had Antonio Valencia, Chris Smalling. They had Juan Manuel Mata, Jesse Lingard, Wayne McRooney was still in that team. Maroon Fellaini was still in that team. Of course, David De Gea Quintana was still in that team. So it's a team that is capable of reaching the finals. Aston Villa reached also the FA Cup semi-finals. I think it was 2014 or 2015 when they lost to Aston by 4-1 at that time. And then, but now the things are really much different. Unai Emery, with the disappointment of losing to Manchester City in midweek, will be looking forward to create a tactical masterclass against Crystal Palace side, beat him by 4-1 in the Premier League, by the way, sometime this season. That was at Selhurst Park. So you do get the sense that I can't say it's 50-50. On paper, Aston Villa have far better players than Crystal Palace. I do not think there is any Crystal Palace player that will walk into that Aston Villa side and get, a starting place. I would really struggle to think of, because when you look at Dean Henderson in goal, of course, Emiliano Martinez is better. When you look at a player like Matty Cash, I think he's a better right back. When you look at Lucas Digne, when you look at that defensive unit of Pau Torres alongside Tyrone Mings or any other, who is the other player that normally plays in there? Maybe Mark Gay, that's the Crystal Palace centre back, who was last summer linked with a move to Chelsea, and Chelsea are still interested in trying to sign him, alongside wanting to sign Gerard Braithwaite from Everton, as well as Dean Howson. So maybe Mark Gay. In that midfield, again, you get the feeling that Adam Wharton, maybe, but not really. I do not think he's a better player than Amadou Onana or Boubacar Kamara. I do not think he's a better player, even though he's really good at Manchester United. Pointing fingers at him, wanting to sign him. Bearing in mind that Casemiro will be leaving and Christian Eriksen. So again, front line. When you look at Joan Felipe Mateta, of course, he has 13 Premier League goals, but I would start. I do think Oli Watkins is a better player, although Marcus Rashford in recent times has been favored ahead of Oli Watkins. Oli Watkins started the game versus Newcastle, but when it came to facing Man City, it was Marcus Rashford that started up front. You have players like John McGinn, the captain. You do have players like Marco Asensio, very experienced player, UEFA Champions League winner with Real Madrid in 2018 and 2022. Of course, he's on loan from PSG. So Jacob Ramsey and Morgan Rogers, really, really interesting players. Although Eberechi is a good player, I do not think he really gets ahead of any of those. So really, on paper, Aston Villa is a much better team. But in cup competitions, anything can happen. So that's why I'm not really ruling out Oliver Glasner to pull off a master tactical strike against Unai Emery. How would it end? I would fancy Aston Villa to advance to the finals. And then tomorrow, Nottingham Forest versus Man City. Nottingham Forest did beat City this season by 1-0. That was Callum Hudson-Odoi, a player that has been linked with a move away from Nottingham Forest, with I think a year left to his contract at the end of this season. So another interesting fixture, that's Nottingham Forest versus Man City. Man City are going to be in very good spirits again, while their standards have fallen off the wagon this season. Kevin De Bruyne announcing that he will be leaving the club at the end of the season and has now been heavily linked with the potential move to Aston Villa. I'm sure he still does want to play in, some bit of elite football in the top 5. Although there is interest from Major League Soccer clubs and the Saudi Pro League, he does fancy staying in England and all around Europe. So even when their season has fallen off the wagon by their own standard, Man City, they would still want to walk out of it with a piece of silverware. and the FA Cup is the best opportunity they have. So then they're going to be facing a team that doesn't really know, a manager that really knows how to beat them. Because Nuno Espirito Santo used to give Pep Guardiola a lot of headache when he was still at Wolverhampton Wanderers. I think there's even a season where he beats him home and away. He would go to the hard and play him off the park, and even at Morinx, because he just knows how to tactically, set him up. Of course, you'd expect that Nottingham Forest will play with a low block and try to capitalize on counterattacks through Anthony Elanga, through Carl Hudson-Odoi, through Morgan Gibbs-White, Chris Wood leading the lines. He has as many as 19 Premier League goals this season, so he's been in great form. Then you do have on the side of Man City, Omar Mamouche should be looking to inspire the team. We do know about Erling Haaland is absent through injury. So Omar Mamouche has been one of those players making things happen. Kevin De Bruyne, given the opportunity, will punish you at any given time. Bernardo Silva hasn't had the best season, but again, cannot be counted off. Mateo Kovacic does not to pounce on a ball or two. He doesn't score very often, but he did score one against Everton and nearly scored against Aston Villa, by the way. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting fixture in that one. Again, hard one to call, but I would fancy a final of Aston Villa versus Man City. But also, it wouldn't hurt to have a final of Nottingham Forest versus Crystal Palace. Anyways, guys, allow me to leave it at this. But before I let you go, do not forget, the El Classico is on, that's today or tonight. I think that game should be coming at around 11 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. Yes, at 11 p.m. The Copa del Rey final between Barcelona and Real Madrid. Allow me to end it here and wish you a wonderful weekend. Stay blessed. Let's link up at the earliest time possible in the aftermath of some of those fixtures that are going to be coming your way this weekend. Stay blessed for now and see you next time. Bye-bye.